I am Anukriti Randev, a fourth year law student at Symbiosis Law School, Pune. As the interview coordinator of Libertator magazine, I would like to extend my gratitude to you for taking out time from your very busy schedule to interact with us today.
Thank you.
Mr. Satyajit Desai is a senior advocate who has been practicing in the Gujarat High Court and the Supreme Court of India since a very long time now. His insight relating to the inheritance and succession related laws in India has allowed him to author some of the best selling commentaries on the same. Not only this, Basar has also significantly contributed to the Law Commission's recent report on the Uniform Civil Code, and at the same time, has conducted workshops related to the inclusion of daughters as equal inheritors in the Hindu ancestral property. I would be starting with the interview now, sir. So my first question would be, as part of the legal profession for the last 32 years, you have been a witness to a very dynamic atmosphere in the legal profession and the way it is being practiced. Can you convey your experience as to how the change has been and what trends you've observed over the years in the courts per se?
Okay. Good question. In fact, I would say that there's a sea change so far as practice right now and practice in the early days was concerned, because I have now been in practice for 32 years. When I first started out in practice, legal research is one area that I would like to talk about. That was done very differently. You see, whenever a client came, after a conference with the client, when you look up the law, you had to go through various journals and digests and then commentaries, and then formulate everything, draft everything, and put it up before the court after having drafted the petition. And how would that be done? That would be done, of course, with typewriters in those times. Many right now would not have seen typewriters probably,
Yeah,
because we are all of us now used to computers. So now what happens is, uh, whenever you have to make changes in, say, a petition which is to be put up before the court, those changes can be made immediately within a matter of minutes. But
yeah,
earlier, say, suppose there is a typewritten petition, what would happen? Some changes to happen is required. Whole petition would have to be drafted once again. So that took a lot of time. Whereas here, what you see is maybe change a page here or there, uh, and get it done with. So big change so
yeah,
far as drafting is concerned. Now, even so far as legal research is concerned, as I told you, earlier we used to have these digests. We still have them, but
yeah.
now, of course, we have the advantage of online and offline databases, which makes the work of research very easy, very fast. So, in fact,
Yeah.
it's a time saving thing, which has helped a lot. So, those are the changes that I have seen over the last 3 decades that I have been in practice.
Okay, that's very true, sir. Like, I think the way research is done now, it's so much better, and with the advancement in technology, it just keeps getting easier for us.
Oh, yes.
Sir, can you elaborate, like, who was the main influence in your life in terms of choosing law as a profession?
I actually belong to a family of lawyers. In fact, my grandfather, late Justice S.T. Desai, who was the first Chief Justice of the Gujarat state,
Okay,
was big inspiration for me. Uh, and I, in fact, never wanted to do anything apart from the law. Ever since I saw him arguing in the Supreme Court after his retirement as the Chief Justice here, I would see him arguing, and that is what really inspired me. In fact,
okay,
uh, even his father and his grandfather were also lawyers.
okay,
So much so that even both my daughters are lawyers and have followed in the footsteps. So it's a family profession, so to say.
okay.
So that's a big inspiration. My granddad was a big inspiration for me.
Okay. Sir, as you have mentioned, like the way lawyers practice has also changed, and there are a lot of changes that are coming up in terms of the movements that are happening inside the courts itself.
Yes.
So, you have been a pioneer in starting the Make a Will project.
Hmm.
So, can you elaborate upon that initiative and how are you spreading awareness about the same?
Sure. Uh, See, all of us know that building up wealth, consolidating your wealth, all that is important throughout life. But the next step is also very important, leaving things properly for your descendants. How
Okay.
does one do that? Through a will. One of the methods is, of course, a will. So, as soon as this COVID pandemic started, I thought that this is a great opportunity, in fact, to educate people,
Yeah.
to create awareness amongst people as to you need even a simple will. You may not make an elaborate will, but you need a simple will at least. So, in aid of that, what has happened is I have had various talks with groups of people. I have in these during the actual lockdown, I have maybe had about 5 to 6 webinars on wills, and have reached out to quite a large number of people. The objective, of course, being, as I told you, to create awareness. Go to
Yeah.
your lawyers, make a will, put everything in order, because we don't know what will happen when.
Yeah.
No one is safe these days. Forget economic background, forget resources. No one is safe with this thing happening. In fact,
True.
towards that end, I have also done one more thing. I have also penned a very small book on succession planning through wills, which is also co-authored by both my daughters, and it will be coming out very shortly.
Okay.
So that is the initiative that I have taken up in order to educate people. You know,
Okay.
we have heard about corporate social responsibility, but I would say this is ICR, individual responsibility,
Yeah.
say individual
Yeah.
responsibility of a
That's
person
great.
towards people.
Yeah, that's amazing. So speaking about COVID-19 situation, as you all know that courts have essentially stopped working for civil matters per se,
Yeah.
and like this has affected the work for a lot of young lawyers especially. So can you like tell as to what can be the effect of the same in the long term on the young lawyers especially, and also how the situation can be improved eventually, considering that the current situation would not allow us to reopen the courts very soon, as
Yeah.
the cases are increasing every day. So what according to you should have been done or can be done now?
Yeah. Interesting question given the circumstances. You're right. See, about the first part of your question, uh, all the other aspects of life have gone on after the lockdown has been lifted. So far as formalized structure is concerned, it's only the courts that are closed right now. And the most affected, as you rightly put it, are the younger generation of lawyers who have just started out. My advice to them is please don't lose heart. This is, in fact, a time to read up, do your research. You may not earn that much during the pandemic, but build up your knowledge, tighten your belt right now, be very patient and calm. And there is, of course, gold at the end of the rainbow, as they say.
Yeah.
So be patient. So far as the second part of your question is concerned, again, I would say that technology has come to our aid and has to come to our aid in these times. In fact, all throughout India, if you see, uh, courts are taking up matters, a few matters at least, which are
Hmm.
of urgent importance by video conferencing and other methods. Uh, but that is being done by a limited number of judges right now.
Yeah.
To give you an example, suppose a court has 30 judges. Now, due to video conferencing and all that, and due looking to the urgency of matters, maybe about 10, 12, 15 judges are working, taking up matters, passing orders. One solution is, of course, that all of the judges must start working. They must be allotted work by the chief judge or the chief justice.
Yeah,
And that is how a larger number of matters can be taken up. Maybe even certain important matters on the civil side can be taken up. That is, of course, the only thing that can be done right now, because physical distancing and all those things are major factors right now. And courts being public places, uh, right now, I don't think that it would be a good idea to restart,
yeah,
because there are so many people coming to court. And even if they do restart, I have, of course, given my suggestions on another forum that if you look at a typical courtroom, maybe there are about 75 seats or 80 seats in a courtroom. All of them are full of lawyers and litigants. No, don't do that. Ask the litigants not to attend the court as far as possible.
yeah,
Even lawyers should maintain social distancing. You see, keep one seat vacant
yeah,
in between, social distancing. And of course, the mandatory thing right now, masks, shields, and sanitizers, they are now, I think, they are going to be a part of our life for the foreseeable future. So all
true,
that
true.
has to be taken care of. But coming back to young lawyers, I would address them directly through your forum. Please don't lose heart, tighten your belts, read up, and don't worry. That's what I would tell them.
Yeah. So my next question is that, like, you were requested to give your opinions on certain aspects of the Law Commission of India's committee, which was formed to establish a uniform civil code.
Yes.
So can you elaborate on upon the aspect of how the code can actually be implemented, considering the pretext of the same being not very acceptable to the religious minorities in India?
That is a very potent question that you have put, and a very sensitive one, I would say. Uh, yes, I was invited by the Law Commission to give my views on the subject, and I've already done that by way of a 16 or 18-page report. After that, of course, I have also criticized the report on another
Okay.
forum because certain things were not done. Now, if you come to the fact that the code might not be acceptable to minorities, I would say, why only minorities? It would probably be unacceptable to a large majority of the majority religion also in our country. Because what
Yeah,
are we talking about? We are not only talking about, say, Muslim law, we are also talking about Hindu law, Parsi law, all those laws here. And who would want to give up their rights which are actually protected under the constitution?
yeah,
All this is protected. Why give it up is the big thing. So instead of three or four personal laws, okay, one law sounds good, but look at the sentiments of the people here. That is a very, very major thing. Here, I would, because you see, it entails a major change which will involve amendment to the constitution also. I'm
yeah.
not going into the larger aspects here, but I'll just quote two things here. I would like to quote a speech made by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar on the 2nd of December 1948 in the Constituent Assembly debates, where they were debating about what to do about a probable common civil code. He
Okay.
said that I should also, and I quote, I should also like to point out that all that the state is claiming is this matter is a power to legislate. There is no obligation under the state to do away with personal laws. It is only a giving power. Look at the
Okay.
statement. It is a giving power. It is not the right of the state. It's a giving power. And he further said that there is no one need to be apprehensive of the fact that if the state has the power, the state will immediately proceed to execute or enforce that power in a manner that may be found to be objectionable. And the last thing that he said was, that sovereignty is always limited, no matter even if you assert that it is unlimited, because
Yeah,
sovereignty in the exercise of that power must reconcile itself to the sentiments of different communities. Now, look at that statement. The
yeah,
Constituent Assembly was also conscious of the fact that India is made up of various religions. I think we are probably the only country in the world which has so many religions and so many languages.
yeah,
Anukriti, if you see, our states are divided amongst linguistic lines. See,
true.
we have various religions. And even the Supreme Court, time and again, what has it said about a common civil code? I'll just quote one line from one judgment. There are many, but I'll just quote one line from a judgment which was reported in 1996 Supreme Court. That is Pannalal Pitti versus State of Andhra Pradesh, where the Supreme Court said that it had indicated that an enactment of a uniform law, though desirable, now mark the words, may be counterproductive.
Yeah,
They were very circumspect in saying this. Why? Because even the Supreme Court knows as to what would probably happen if a common civil code is imposed upon the people. So it's, I would say that it is impossible, that it can't be done. But before doing that, the authorities, the government must think not 10 but 100 times
yeah,
before doing this, because it's the sentiments of the people that are involved here. I'm not going into the larger aspects, otherwise, I could probably speak on the Common Civil Code for about an hour. Uh, but these are my feelings. Uh, they have to be circumspect about it.
yeah, that's true. And I think it's a very sensitive issue because at the end of the day, when you're catering to such a huge population, there's so
Yeah.
many things that you have to consider. And a uniform civil code, I don't think would be able to cater to everyone's need and,
You're,
religious sentiments as well.
you're so right.
Um,
In fact, why? Because a common civil code is not going to be applicable to maybe a few lakh or a few crore. It's going to be applicable, if at all it comes into being, every citizen of the country.
yeah,
So the thought of every citizen counts.
exactly. Yeah, that's true. So moving on to a lesser controversial topic, I would like to ask that, you have been a visiting faculty and a guest lecturer at various educational institutes in India. So what your general experience has been with students?
Yes. See, the general experience has always been satisfactory. In fact, the newer generation of students, and you are also one of them,
Yeah,
uh, they are very, very, research oriented. They know what they are doing. They know how to ask the correct questions to the person who's teaching them. So even he or she who is teaching is tested.
yeah,
So that is, people just don't accept what you teach them, and that is the right approach. Overall, the experience has always been satisfactory. What has really changed over the years is, again, technology. I'll go back to that, because students as well as those who are teaching them are now using technology, adapting to various new methods of teaching. Quality of education has gone up, and it's become more demanding now. In fact, I'll give you one very small example. I was actually a very reluctant teacher. I said, I'm a lawyer, I'm not a teacher, when I was asked to teach first. But then when
okay,
I started teaching, one of the methods that I employed was so new to the students that they were surprised. After one or two lectures, I immediately told them once that I want you to research on this and come up with two judgments on this issue on my next lecture. So when I went to the next lecture, and after having taught for some time, I said, I had asked you to give me two judgments. Has anybody got them? So a couple of students got up. I said, okay, come here and tell us what you thought about the judgments and why did the court hold so. So they were in the place of the teacher. They were to tell us what is happening. That system was so new to them. In fact, I probably unconsciously applied the Western method of teaching, more interactive,
Yeah,
because I wanted them to tell us what they found from the judgment, what happened, and how the law was changed probably because of that judgment. See, that is an interactive method of teaching. So I employed that. So overall, I said the experience has been very good. I still go for guest lectures at times, and I've always found it enjoyable.
that's true. And also, I feel that the interactive part of teaching somehow lacks sometimes in a lot of teachers. And I think that actually enables the students to learn more. Because at the end of the day, the whole process is about learning, which kind of lacks because of the lack of interaction.
Yes, because not only does it make it more interesting, but the person who is learning, the student, he or she would probably go back home and research on that. That
Yeah,
creates interest. That creates interest. That is why would help more. It would set the student thinking.
yeah, that's true.
That helps.
Uh, Yeah, so property related disputes in India tend to take a lot of years to get decided. Like the law is kind of being misused to extract unwanted benefits out of the same. So as a well-known author to a lot of commentaries on succession and inheritance laws and mullah on Hindu law as well, what are your views about the possible solutions and the changes that can be made in the law to, curtail this problem and decrease the burden of the courts as well?
Good question. Because as I have always said, even in my lectures to say bodies of lawyers or others, if you look at the pattern of litigation in the whole country, see, more than 50% of the litigation is basically against the government. If you remove that portion from the rest of the 50%, a large portion is property litigation amongst family members. So you are
Yeah,
practically speaking about at least one fifth of the litigation in the country, which
yeah,
is a very large number. Uh, Now, one possible solution that I see to the problems that you pointed out is this. You see, the judge to population ratio, there is something called judge to population ratio.
yeah,
Uh, in India, it is very low as compared to other countries, or especially Western countries. We need to increase the infrastructure of courts more. We need to appoint more judges so that cases proceed faster. Uh, there should also be a mechanism where delays are cut short. Of course, the Civil Procedure Code does contain provisions, but they are still observed more in their breach rather than in their enforcement. So courts should be strict about adjournments. That is another thing. Uh, Now, coming to the actual aspect of family disputes, you see, there is something which is known as family settlements
yeah,
or family documents. If a family is to enter into a family settlement, that will not only probably avoid future disputes, but if there is an ongoing dispute, it could be settled under the aegis of that document itself. And family settlements have been recognized and been given primacy by all courts in the country, including the Supreme Court. I'll
okay,
in fact quote one instance here. This was a case of a very well-known business family which has business interests in Maharashtra as well as in Kolkata. There were various disputes which went up to both the high courts, respective high courts. There was an arbitrator also appointed. The arbitrator gave his award. Probably the award was challenged before the Supreme Court. And after some time, there was a family arrangement or a settlement which sought to put an end to everything. Now, look at the importance of what the family settlement or arrangement is. The Supreme Court said that yes, we will go by what is there in the family arrangement and we'll put an end to the dispute. Even the award of the arbitrator was put aside by the Supreme Court. That is the primacy which is given to family arrangements or settlements. In very rough terms, what is it? In earlier times, you see, in villages when there was a dispute, even right now, they used to have panchayat,
Yeah,
right? This is not a panchayat, but all family members who are concerned getting together, making a document in order to see that all disputes are ironed out and even future disputes are avoided. So that is a very good tool, in fact.
true.
This is how things can be done. Of course, these are just a few suggestions.
And I also personally think that, the alternate ways of settling disputes actually make a lot of sense because, courts tend to take a lot of time with the formal applications and
Yes, very true. In fact,
yeah,
in one of the interviews earlier, if I remember the line correctly, I said that I had said that try and settle things by correspondence, negotiation, etc. Courts should always be the last resort.
yeah,
So this is how things can happen. And as I told you, even if it goes to court, if there is something like a settlement, courts are going to go by it, definitely.
yeah,
And put their stamp of approval on that. If it is
yeah,
found correct and proper in all respects,
true.
that can happen.
So moving on, so sir, a lot of students nowadays, tend to let go of the things they enjoy while they are immersing themselves in the race towards the success as a lawyer. So how essential do you think it is to manage our time and to pursue our hobbies within that process of studying and getting jobs?
I know every student, and especially law students, uh, they want to succeed from day one. Everyone wants to succeed from day one, make a mark for himself or herself. But, and of course, working hard for it, researching, writing papers, attending lectures, all that takes time. But as that old saying goes, all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. Uh, I would say anybody must carve out at least a couple of hours a day for herself or himself. Do something which is unrelated to your work. Pursue your hobbies, whatever you like. If you like general reading, do that. If you like watching something on television, do that. Get your mind off your work. What will be the effect? Your mind is going to be relaxed. Your body is going to be relaxed because of that. What will be the net result? Your productivity will go up. It will be more when you work. It will, in fact, increase because you've done something that you like and you come back to your table refreshed. So
Yeah,
it's very important to at least carve out 1 or 2 hours a day for yourself, as they put it these days, me time.
yeah,
That me time is very important.
yeah.
That must happen.
True, sir. That's very true. So, sir, would you like to give any parting advice to the aspiring lawyers?
Uh, Parting advice, yes, just a little bit of it because I don't want to preach. I would say that you see, lawyers read a lot. We are supposed to read a lot.
Yeah,
Uh, but apart from that, I would say that lawyers must also inculcate the habit of general reading, reading apart from the law. Because after all, not only are we concerned with law, we are concerned with language also.
yeah,
General language is going to improve your vocabulary, your language skills, and it's going to help you no end. So general reading is something that you must do. So far as drafting is concerned, I would say be as precise as you can in your drafting. Use clear and proper language. When you are in court, your submissions must be very clear and precise. That is, of course, if you are practicing as a litigating advocate.
Yeah.
One important thing, please avoid repetition. Avoid repeating your arguments. Judges are pressed for time. They don't like lawyers who keep on repeating their arguments. A lawyer must not feel that if I keep on repeating what I say, that the judge is going to believe me or hold in favor of my client. It's just going
Yeah.
to make the judge angry if you keep on repeating. So don't repeat things. Most important, be courteous to the judge and also be courteous to your opposing counsel. You are not at war, you see. What you are doing
Yeah.
is putting across your point of view. We are, as they say, foot soldiers of the Constitution. Lawyers are foot soldiers of the Constitution. Put forward your arguments in a proper manner, very courteously. In closing, I would say, look at, if you read the epics like Mahabharat closely. At the end of the day, after the war was over, it is said that both camps used to eat dinners together
Yeah.
because the war was a different thing, but they were still related. I'm
Yeah.
not saying that lawyers have dinner together, but be calm, be cool. No need to blow your top, absolutely, either in court or outside. Uh, and be courteous to the judge as well as to your opponents. That should do the trick. That should help you advance your career because you will be known as a lawyer who not only puts forward submissions properly, but also takes care to see that the niceties of the profession are observed well.
Yeah. So thank you so much, sir. Your interview and your answers were very insightful, and they personally gave me a new perspective about a lot of things, especially your views related to the Uniform Civil Code, as I would have never thought of the perspective where, this could be something which even the majority would probably not accept in a lot of ways. So thank you
So
so
those
much
are
for your
those
time
are
again.
my views, of course.
Yeah, no, definitely. But in all honesty, I never thought of it that way. I always used to think that it's something the minorities might not accept. But that your answer was very true, that maybe even the majority would not be very open to this idea per se. So thank you so much for your time again, and I hope we would be able to get more of your views on various topics through our articles in the magazine as well.
Thank you, Anupruti. It's been a pleasure speaking to you, and good luck to your viewers also.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much, sir.